Welcome to Fiction Flux. How are you doing? Let's get started. Izuku Midoriya had faced villains who could erase her quirk. She had faced a monster wearing 13 hands like trophies. She had stood in the smoking ruins of Jaku General Hospital and screamed until her throat bled, refusing to let a hero die in front of her. None of that prepared her for falling through the sky and landing somewhere that wasn't sky at all. 1 second she was midair, one for all humming down her arm as she closed the distance on a shadowy figure who had torn a hole in the world itself. The villain called Kurogiri had warped again, and she had jumped in after him, reckless, furious, determined not to lose him this time. The next second, the warp gate spat her out somewhere that smelled like old blood and older wood. She hit the ground hard, rolling twice before her body remembered how to absorb impact. 5 years of hero training doing what instinct alone couldn't. She came up in a crouch, green eyes wide, freckled cheeks scraped raw, hair a wild storm of curls around her face. The sky was wrong. There was no sky, just a ceiling, impossibly high wooden beams stretching in every direction like the ribcage of some vast dead god. Hallways branched and twisted around her, doors that led to more doors, staircases that climbed toward nothing. The air was heavy with a presence she couldn't name but could feel, pressing against her skin like static before a lightning strike. "This isn't Kurogiri's warp gate," she whispered, pushing herself upright. Her hero costume, the deep green bodysuit, the red boots, the rabbit-eared hood pushed back off her head, was torn at the shoulder from the fall. This isn't anywhere I've trained for. A floorboard creaked behind her. Izuku spun, one for all already surging into her knuckles, fists raised in full cowl stance, and found herself staring at a man who should not have existed. He was massive, easily 7 feet of corded muscle wrapped in dark, tattoo-marked skin, a second pair of arms folding out from beneath the first like something out of a nightmare painting. 4 crimson eyes fixed on her with an expression that wasn't quite curiosity and wasn't quite hunger. A jagged scar split his mouth into something like a permanent, mocking grin, and where a normal person's face ended, 4 black marks curled across his forehead like a brand. "Well," the man said, and his voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate the floorboards themselves. "That's new." Izuku didn't move. Every hero instinct she had screamed the same word. "Threat." "Who?" she started. "Sukuna," the man said, and something in the way he said it, flat, absolute, a title carved into stone, told her it wasn't just a name. "King of Curses, and you little intruder just fell into my castle." The Infinity Castle did not behave like any building Izuku had ever fought inside. She learned that the hard way in the first 10 seconds, when Sukuna's clawed hand lashed out almost lazily, not even a real attack, she'd realize later just a test, and the wall beside her head simply vanished sliced clean through by something invisible, something that hadn't traveled through the air at all. It had just happened, cause and effect skipping a step. She threw herself sideways, rolling under support beam, mind racing through the only framework she had, quirk analysis. Enhanced strength, 4 arms, some kind of ranged cutting ability with no visible projectile. Speed rating, unknown, hasn't shown top speed yet. "You're fast," Sukuna observed, not moving from where he stood, arms crossed over his chest, watching her the way a cat watches a bird that hasn't yet realized the window is closed. For a human. "I'm human," Izuku snapped, circling him, boots skidding on wood that groaned under 35% of one for all. "What are you supposed to be?" Something like delight flickered across that terrifying face. "She doesn't even know what a curse is. How wonderfully out of place you are." Curse, the word settled into her stomach like a stone. Not a quirk, not a villain with a strange ability. Something else, something this world apparently produced the way her world produced heroes and villains, except this thing radiated a wrongness that made her hero senses light up in a way All Might's true form never had, not even at his most terrifying. She didn't get more time to think about it. Sukuna moved. He didn't run, he didn't leap. One moment he was 10 meters away and the next his fist, one of *4, was already an inch from her ribs, and she barely got a Delaware smash caliber block up in time, one for all screaming down her forearm as she deflected the blow sideways. The impact cracked the floor beneath her feet into a spiderweb of fractures. Izuku skidded back, gritting her teeth, shaking out an arm that felt like it had been hit by a truck. That's not normal enhanced strength, that's..." "You're still talking." Sukuna tilted his head, and the black marks on his forehead seemed to pulse. "I've killed faster things than you for less." "Then why haven't you?" she almost asked, and then didn't because some instinct, some deep hero-trained part of her brain, told her that voicing that question out loud might be the thing that finally made him stop holding back. Instead, she planted her feet, drew a slow breath, and let green lightning crawl up both arms. My name is Izuku Midoriya, she said, voice steadier than she felt. I'm a hero, and heroes don't run. Sukuna's grin widened, all teeth. How annoying, he said, and for the first time, something that might have been genuine interest flickered behind those 4 crimson eyes. Let's see how long that lasts. The fight that followed nearly killed her 3 times. Izuku learned the shape of the Infinity Castle the way she'd once learned the shape of a battlefield strewn with rubble, fast, brutal, and through pain. The corridor's asterisk shifted. Rooms she'd passed through reappeared behind her, hallways looped back on themselves, and every time she thought she'd found an exit, the castle simply closed it. It's not going to let you leave, Sukuna said conversationally, almost bored, as he casually stepped through a doorway that had been solid wall 2 seconds earlier. This place isn't mine, little hero. I'm only borrowing it. From who? Izuku gasped, pressing a hand to her side where a graze from his invisible cutting technique had opened a thin, stinging line through her costume. Someone who'd find you far less interesting to talk to. Sukuna crouched, suddenly at eye level with her, and for one strange, suspended second, Izuku saw something almost thoughtful cross his face. You keep getting back up. That's what I do. It's stupid, he said it without malice, just an observation, flat as a blade. You've broken 3 ribs. Your right leg is compensating for a fracture you haven't noticed yet because your body's flooding itself with something to numb the pain. You should have stopped fighting 4 exchanges ago. Izuku froze, not because he was wrong. Because he was right in clinical, precise detail, and something about the way he catalogued her injuries, almost with a strange flicker of respect made the fight in her chest hitch sideways into something else. Something more complicated than fear. How do you? I've spent a very long time learning how bodies break. Sukuna straightened, forearms unfolding, and behind him the corridor seemed to breathe wooden walls flexing like lungs. Most things stop being interesting once you know exactly how they'll die. He paused, and the pause felt heavier than anything he'd said yet. You're not most things. The compliment, if it even was one, landed somewhere Izuku didn't have a category for. Villains didn't compliment her. Villains sneered or monologued or screamed. This quiet, curious cruelty was something new, and it terrified her more than the forearms ever could. She used the half-second of confusion to do the only thing that made sense. She ran. She didn't get far. Of course she didn't. The castle folded a staircase into a dead end after 11 seconds, and Izuku slammed to a stop in a room lined with old sliding doors, chest heaving, one for all's borrowed strength starting to fray at the edges from overuse. Behind her, unhurried footsteps. You know, Sukuna's voice drifted down the hallway, almost lazy now. In 1,000 years, nothing has ever run from me and lived long enough to matter. And yet here you are, planning your next move instead of begging. Izuku turned, back pressed to a wall that felt disturbingly warm, like it was alive. Begging doesn't work on people like you, she said. I learned that a long time ago. People like me? Sukuna appeared in the doorway, filling it, 4 crimson eyes glinting with something between amusement and hunger. You say that like you've met one before. I've met villains who thought pain made them powerful. I've met ones who thought fear made them right. She pushed off the wall, ignoring the scream of her cracked ribs, forcing herself into a ready stance even though every part of her body was begging her to stop. You're not the first monster I've stood in front of. Something shifted in Sukuna's expression, not anger, not offense. Something closer to delight, sharp and sudden, like she'd finally said something worth his attention. Monster, he rolled the word around like he was tasting it. I like that better than curse, at least it's honest. He took one slow step forward and the floorboards didn't so much creak as flex like the whole castle was holding its breath along with her. Tell me something, little hero. In your world, do heroes ever lose? Izuku's jaw tightened. Yes. And when they do. She thought of Nightai. She thought of a hospital corridor and a promise she'd made to someone whose eyes had already gone still. She thought of every scar on her own knuckles, earned the hard way, one broken bone at a time, because that was the price of the power she carried. They get back up, she said, voice cracking but not breaking, or someone else does it for them. For a long moment, Sukuna said nothing. The castle around them seemed to hum, waiting. Then he smiled, and this time it wasn't mocking. It was something far more dangerous. Then get up, Izuku Midoriya, he said, 4 arms unfolding like the opening act of something inevitable. Because I'm not finished with you yet, and neither, I think, is this castle. What happened next would haunt every retelling of this story, for as long as it was told. Sukuna didn't attack, not immediately. Instead, he crouched, 4 arms folding behind him with an almost courteous stillness, and studied her the way a craftsman studies a blade before deciding whether it's worth sharpening or scrapping. I could kill you in the time it takes you to blink, he said, and there was no arrogance in it, only fact. I've killed faster, stronger, smarter things than a half-broken girl bleeding through her own costume. His eyes narrowed, 4 points of crimson fire. And yet, Izuku's voice was barely a whisper now, adrenaline the only thing keeping her upright. You keep interesting me. He said it like a confession he resented making. This castle is a cage built by someone smarter than either of us, girl. It doesn't let things leave once they've fallen in, not villains, not curses, not you. So here is what I propose. Izuku's whole body went rigid. I don't make deals with villains. You don't have a choice, Sukuna's grin sharpened. You're bleeding out in a maze that rearranges itself every time you blink, powered by an ability that's already burning through your reserves faster than you can replace them. In an hour, you won't be able to stand. In 2, you'll be dead, and not by my hand, which would almost be a mercy. He rose to his full towering height. Or you survive with me. Because whatever built this castle didn't plan for 2 monsters walking its halls together instead of 1. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Why? Izuku finally asked. Why would you help me? Sukuna's 4 eyes glinted, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, something almost human flickered behind the cruelty. Because it's been a very long time, he said quietly, since anything made this place feel less like a tomb. Neither of them noticed the doorway at the far end of the hall. It hadn't been there a moment ago. Now it stood open, black and silent, and something inside it was asterisk watching, patient, ancient, amused in a way that made even the King of Curses go suddenly, uncharacteristically still. Sukuna, Izuku breathed, feeling the temperature of the room drop 10 degrees in an instant. That door wasn't there before. I know, for the first time since she'd fallen into this nightmare, Sukuna's voice had lost its mocking edge entirely, which means the castle's owner just decided we're no longer boring enough to ignore. From the darkness beyond the door, a voice like breaking glass and old laughter whispered a single word, one Izuku didn't understand, but felt in her bones like a verdict being read. The floor beneath them began, slowly, impossibly, to open. Sukuna's 4 eyes narrowed at the widening doorway, and for the first time since Izuku had crashed into this nightmare, killing intent that wasn't aimed at her filled the air like a physical weight. Stay behind me, he said. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really spoken to her, more like a fact he was statting to the room. Izuku's instincts screamed to argue, to plant her feet and refuse to hide behind anyone, villain or not. But her body had other plans. Her knees buckled the second she tried to shift her weight, one for all finally hitting the wall she'd been sprinting toward for the last 20 minutes. She caught herself on a support beam, breath ragged, vision swimming at the edges. I don't need protecting, she gasped anyway, because some things you say on principle, even when your body is actively betraying you. You're bleeding from 4 places and you can't stand without furniture, Sukuna said flatly, not even looking back at her. This isn't chivalry, girl, it's math. You're a liability right now, and I don't like sharing my kills. The darkness beyond the door rippled, and then something stepped out of it that made even Sukuna's jaw tighten. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was shaped like one, tall and gaunt, wrapped in robes so black they seemed to drink the dim light of the hallway, but where a face should have been there was only a smooth, featureless curve, like a mask that had never needed features to begin with. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once, the walls, the floor, the air itself. To intruders, it said, almost thoughtfully, how rare, my castle hasn't held 2 heartbeats it didn't invite in over a century. Your castle, Sukuna repeated, and there was an edge in his voice now, something sharpened to a killing point. I was under the impression I was borrowing it. You were tolerated, the figure corrected gently. There's a difference. Tolerance ends when the guest starts making noise the house doesn't like. The featureless curve of its face tilted, ever so slightly toward Izuku, and you brought noise. Izuku forced herself upright, one hand braced against the beam, green eyes locking onto the figure despite every nerve in her body telling her to look away. Who are you? Question with too many answers to be worth asking, the figure said. Call me the Keeper if you need a word for it, I've worn worse names. A long, too thin hand rose, and where it moved, the wooden walls groaned and reshaped themselves. Doorways ceilings shut one by one down the corridor behind Izuku and Sukuna both. But you should be more concerned with a simpler question. Why would I let either of you leave, when you've both proven so much more interesting caged together than apart? Sukuna's 4 arms flexed, claws extending with a sound like knives being drawn from a sheath. Careful, he said, voice dropping into something low and dangerous. I've unmade things larger than a haunted house before. I know, the Keeper didn't sound afraid. If anything, it sounded pleased. That's precisely why I haven't simply erased you already, King of Curses. Rare toys should be played with, not discarded. The blank curve turned back toward Izuku, and she felt it like a physical pressure against her skin. As for you, little hero, you fell through a gap between worlds that shouldn't exist. Do you understand what that makes you? Izuku's throat was dry. No. A mistake, the keeper said almost fondly. The best kind, the kind that becomes useful. The floor beneath both of them dropped away without warning, not collapsing, but simply ceasing to be there, the way a light switches off. Izuku barely had time to scream before gravity took her. Sukuna's curse and the hero both plunging into a darkness that swallowed sound, swallowed light, swallowed the last thing Izuku heard before the world went black. The keeper's voice, soft as a closing door. Let's see what you become down there together. The fall didn't feel like falling. There was no wind, no rush of air, no sense of up or down, just an endless, silent drop through a darkness so complete that Izuku lost track of her own limbs. She tried to scream and heard nothing, not even her own voice. Panic clawed up her throat, cold and absolute, until a hand, 4 of them actually, wrapping around her from different angles like some grotesque, protective cage, hauled her against a chest made of solid muscle and old scars. Stop thrashing, Sukuna's voice cut through the void, and impossibly, she could hear him even though she couldn't hear herself. You'll dislocate something before we even land. Land where? There's no. Her words cut off as light exploded around them, sudden and violent, and the two of them slammed onto solid ground hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. She lay there for a long moment, coughing, staring up at a ceiling that was not the Infinity Castle's oppressive wooden beams. This ceiling was stone, ancient and cracked, threaded with veins of something that pulsed faintly, like the whole structure had a heartbeat. Torches burned in brackets along the walls with flame that flickered blue instead of orange. Sukuna was already on his feet, all 4 arms tense, scanning the room with the wary precision of something that had survived a very long time by never trusting a new environment. The keeper moved us, he said. This isn't the castle anymore, feel it. Izuku forced herself upright, wincing at the protest from her ribs, and reached out with senses she'd honed over years of hero work, the subtle hum of danger, the pressure of a space that wanted to hurt you. She'd felt it in the castle, thick and suffocating. Here it was different, sharper, hungrier. It feels alive, she said quietly, like the walls are watching. They are. Sukuna's eyes, all 4 of them, swept the chamber they'd landed in. It was circular, maybe 30 meters across, lined with those pulsing veins of light, and at its center stood a raised dais with nothing on it. No altar, no weapon, no obvious trap, just empty stone, which somehow made it worse. This is a testing ground. The keeper didn't drop us here by accident. It wants to see what we do. What we do about what? Izuku pushed herself to her feet, testing her weight on her injured leg. The fracture Sukuna had diagnosed earlier throbbed with every heartbeat, but it held. Barely. There's nothing here. There will be. Sukuna's voice had gone flat, almost bored, the way it did right before violence. Places like this don't stay empty long. As if summoned by the words themselves, the veins of light along the walls flared brighter, and from the cracks between the stones, shapes began to peel themselves free, humanoid, but wrong, limbs bending at angles that made Izuku's stomach turn, faces smooth and featureless like miniature echoes of the keeper itself. They didn't walk so much as unfold, joints popping into existence one after another until a dozen of them stood arrayed around the dais, swaying slightly, waiting. Constructs, Sukuna muttered. Cheap ones. The keeper's testing our compatibility, not our strength. He rolled his shoulders, and Izuku caught something almost like anticipation flicker across his face. Which means it wants to see if we fight together, or if I let you die here to save myself the trouble. Izuku's fists clenched, green lightning already crackling faintly up her forearms despite her body's exhaustion. And which one are you going to do? Sukuna glanced at her sideways, the ghost of that dangerous grin returning. Haven't decided yet. Try not to disappoint me before I do. The constructs moved as one, and the fight began. Izuku met the first one head-on, driving a Delaware smash into its chest that should have ended it in a single blow, and instead watched in horror as the construct simply reformed around the point of impact, her fist buried wrist-deep in a torso that flowed like wet clay before snapping shut around her arm like a trap. She yanked back, tearing free at the cost of skin scraped raw, stumbling as 2 more closed in from either side. They're not solid, she shouted. Physical hits don't work, they just reshape, I noticed. Sukuna's forearms were already a blur of motion, invisible cuts, his cursed technique. She realized, some kind of slicing ability that didn't need contact, tearing through constructs in efficient, contemptuous arcs. 3 fell in the time it took her to process the sentence, collapsing into puddles of dark matter that hissed and evaporated. Your strength is useless against something that doesn't have structure to break. You need precision, not power. Easy for you to say when your hits ignore structure entirely. Then stop hitting what you can see and start hitting what's underneath it. Sukuna spun, driving a clawed hand through a 4th construct's center, and this time it didn't reform, it simply stopped, crumbling into dust. There's a core. Every one of these things has a single point holding the shape together. Find it. Izuku's mind raced, analysis kicking in even through the haze of pain and adrenaline, the way she'd broken down Muscular's fighting style, the way she'd mapped Overhaul's trigger drug in real time. She watched the next construct lunge for her, tracked the faint pulse of light beneath its featureless chest, brighter than the rest of its shifting mass. There! She didn't throw a full-power punch this time. She threw a precise 15% output, focused entirely into a single knuckle, aimed exactly where the light pulsed strongest. The construct convulsed, its wrongly jointed limbs seizing, and then it collapsed into the same hissing dust as Sukuna's kills. There we go, Sukuna said, something almost like approval in his voice as he tore through the last two constructs with brutal efficiency. You learn fast for a human. Izuku didn't have breath to respond. She sank to one knee, chest heaving, the last of her adrenaline burning out all at once now that the immediate threat was gone. The dais at the center of the room pulsed once, twice, and then a section of the stone floor slid open with a grinding groan, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. The keepers satisfied, for now. Sukuna's eyes lingered on her a moment longer than necessary, something unreadable behind the crimson. You should be dead, twice over by my count. I've been told that before. Izuku forced herself upright again, ignoring the way the room spun for a second before settling. Doesn't seem to stick. Clearly, he turned toward the staircase, forearms folding behind his back with an ease that made the last few minutes of carnage look almost casual. Come on, little hero. Whatever's down there, it's the real test. This room was just the invitation. Izuku hesitated at the top of the stairs, staring into the darkness below, every hero instinct in her screaming that walking into an unknown enemy's dungeon, beside a being who had, less than an hour ago, been trying to kill her, was possibly the worst decision of her entire career. Then she thought of the keeper's voice, soft and patient, promising to see what they'd become down there together, and she thought, with a cold certainty that settled somewhere deep in her chest, that refusing to move forward wouldn't save her from finding out anyway. She stepped down into the dark. Sukuna followed a half-step behind, silent as a shadow, and somewhere far above them, the stone door at the top of the stairs sealed shut with a sound like a held breath finally released. The staircase spiraled down far longer than either of them expected, long enough that Izuku lost count of the turns, long enough that the blue torchlight from the chamber above faded entirely, replaced by a dim, pulsing glow that seemed to come from the stone itself, veins of pale light threading through the walls like something circulatory. The air grew colder with every step, and thicker too, pressing against her lungs in a way that made each breath feel deliberate, effortful. You're limping worse, Sukuna observed from behind her, his voice low in the enclosed space, echoing strangely off walls that seemed to absorb sound as much as carry it. I noticed. Izuku kept her hand braced against the wall, more for the illusion of stability than any real support. The stone was slick, almost damp, though nothing dripped. I'll manage. You'll slow us down and get us both killed by something that isn't even trying yet. There was no cruelty in the observation, just the same flat, clinical honesty he'd used to catalogue her broken ribs back in the castle. He stopped walking. Sit. I don't have time to. You don't have a choice, and neither do I, because if you collapse on these stairs, I'm not carrying you the rest of the way out of the goodness of my non-existent heart. He crouched, gesturing impatiently at the step beside him. Sit. I've killed enough things to know what dying of blood loss looks like on a person, and you're 2 shades paler than you were an hour ago. Izuku sat, mostly because her leg had started shaking in a way that scared her more than she wanted to admit. Sukuna's clawed hand, one of the lower set, oddly gentler than she expected, pressed against the gash along her ribs, and she hissed at the contact. Hold still, something flickered across his palm, a faint reddish shimmer she didn't recognize, nothing like one for all's green lightning. Warmth spread from the wound outward, not painful exactly, but strange, invasive, like her own body's healing processes had been grabbed by the collar and shoved into overdrive. Reverse cursed technique. Don't get used to it, I'm not doing this because I like you. Then why are you doing it? Izuku watched the wound at her side knit shut, the bleeding slowing to a trickle and then stopping entirely, though the ache beneath her ribs remained, dull and constant. You said it yourself, I'm a liability. A liability that's occasionally useful. Sukuna withdrew his hand, flexing clawed fingers like he was shaking off something unpleasant. You found the core in that construct faster than most sorcerers I fought would have. That's not nothing. His 4 eyes met hers, unreadable in the dim light. And the Keeper wants us dead in a very specific way, together or not at all. I'd rather decide how this ends than let some architect of a haunted house decide it for me. Izuku turned that over in her mind, sitting in the cold and the dark with a monster who'd tried to kill her less than 2 hours ago, now literally healing her wounds. It should have felt more absurd than it did. Maybe that was the most unsettling part, how quickly her brain had started filing him under asterisk ally, conditional instead of asterisk threat, active. Back in the castle, she said slowly, you asked why heroes get back up. Why does it matter to you? Sukuna was quiet for a moment, long enough that she thought he might not answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its usual mockery. I've existed a very long time. Long enough that most things stop surprising me, how they fight, how they beg, how they die. It all starts to look the same after the 1000th repetition. He rose to his full height, looking down the staircase into the dark below. You don't look the same. That's rare enough to be worth keeping alive, at least until it stops being true. That's a terrible reason to help someone. It's the only reason I have. He started walking again, not waiting to see if she'd follow. Get up, little hero. The stairs don't end themselves. She followed, of course she followed. What else was there to do? In a place with no visible exit except forward and no ally, except the last thing in any universe she should have trusted. The staircase ended in a hall so vast, it made the earlier chamber look like a closet. Izuku's breath caught as she stepped off the final stair. The ceiling, if there even was one, lost somewhere far overhead in shadow. The veined light from the walls now pulsing in slow, synchronized waves, like the entire structure was breathing in time with something enormous and unseen. The floor beneath her boots was black stone polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the light in fractured, dizzying patterns that made her stomach lurch if she looked at it too long. At the far end of the hall, easily 100 meters away, something waited. It wasn't the keeper. Izuku knew that immediately, some primal part of her brain recognizing the difference the way you recognize the difference between a stray dog and something that had never been alive to begin with. This thing was seated on a throne carved from the same black stone as the floor, motionless, its form flickering at the edges like a badly tuned television, sometimes humanoid, sometimes something with too many limbs and not enough face. That's not a construct, Sukuna said quietly, and for the first time since she'd met him, Izuku heard something in his voice that might have been caution. That's not the keeper either, that's something older than both. Older how? I don't know, he said it like an admission that cost him something, and I don't like not knowing. The flickering shape on the throne shifted, and though it had no visible eyes, Izuku felt the weight of its attention land on them both like a physical blow, heavy enough to buckle her knees. A voice followed, not spoken aloud, but somehow inside her skull, cold and vast and utterly without warmth. 2, the word rippled through her mind like a stone dropped in still water. The keeper brought 2. How long has it been since anything interesting fell into this place at all? And now, a curse and a stranger from beyond the walls, walking side by side like allies. Who are you? Izuku called out, forcing steel into her voice despite every instinct screaming at her to run. A question you are not owed an answer to. The flickering shape rose from the throne, and as it did, the black stone floor between them and it began to crack, thin fissures of crimson light spreading outward like a wound opening. But I will give you this much, little stranger. You stand in the oldest room of a castle built to hold things that should never have existed in the first place, and I am the reason nothing that enters here has ever truly left. Sukuna's forearms tensed, claws extending, and beside her Izuku felt the temperature of the air itself seem to drop as his cursed energy surged, thick and suffocating even to someone who couldn't sense it the way he could. That's a bold claim, Sukuna said, and despite the caution in his earlier words, his voice now carried nothing but contempt, sharp as a blade being drawn. I've torn apart things that called themselves eternal before. It's never once been true. You misunderstand. The crimson light spreading across the floor reached their feet, and Izuku felt it climb up through her boots like ice water, freezing and burning at once. I am not asking you to believe me, King of Curses. I am asking you to test it, because the last thing that tried and failed is still screaming somewhere beneath this floor, and it has been screaming for 400 years. The throne room seemed to inhale, the crimson light flaring bright enough to blind, and somewhere in the sudden white-hot silence that followed, Izuku heard Sukuna say one final thing before the world tore itself apart around them both. Then let's make it stop. The light didn't fade so much as asterisk shatter asterisk, the throne room fracturing into 1,000 overlapping images, the same hall, repeated, layered atop itself like reflections caught between 2 mirrors. Izuku staggered, disoriented, reaching out on instinct only to find Sukuna's hand already closed around her wrist, anchoring her in place. Don't move, he growled. It's trying to split us apart. Fighting that thing while separated is how you end up screaming under the floor with the last one. How do you know that's what it's doing? Because it's the only trick worth using against 2 enemies who can actually work together. His grip tightened, and Izuku felt something pulse through the contact, his cursed energy, she realized, deliberately bleeding into her skin like a tether. Focus on me, not the light. She did, and the moment she stopped staring into the fractured white glow, the nausea eased, the ground beneath her boots solidifying back into a single, coherent floor instead of a dozen flickering overlays. The throne room reassembled itself around them, and the flickering shape, the voice, she found herself thinking of it now, since it had refused a name, stood at the center of the hall, no longer seated, its form finally settling into something almost fixed. It was tall, taller than Sukuna, built from the same shifting darkness as the constructs upstairs, but denser, older edges that didn't blur so much as refused to be looked at directly. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth void, and yet Izuku had the unshakable sense that it was studying her, cataloguing her, the way Sukuna had catalogued her injuries, except colder, more patient, more *hungry*. Interesting, the voice said, and this time it didn't bother pretending to speak aloud, the words simply arriving inside her skull like unwelcome guests. The last curse who stood where you stand tried to devour the stranger beside him the moment I offered the chance. You held onto her instead. Why? Does it matter? Sukuna's voice was flat, dangerous. You're stalling. That usually means something's afraid to start. I am not afraid. The darkness around the voice rippled, and the crimson fissures in the floor widened, crimson light bleeding upward in thin, flickering columns, like blood finding cracks in stone. I am curious. It has been 4 centuries since anything in this castle chose cooperation over consumption. I would like to understand why before I end it. Izuku's mind raced, hero instincts kicking in even here, even now, cataloguing the room for exits, weaknesses, anything useful. There were none. No doors besides the staircase behind them, no windows, nothing but black stone and crimson light and 100 meters of empty floor between them, and a being that spoke like it had already decided how this would end. Because trust isn't a weakness, she said, before she'd fully decided to speak at all. Not always. Sometimes it's the only thing that keeps you alive long enough to matter. Trust, the word rippled through her skull like something being turned over, examined, weighed, a fragile currency. I have watched 1,000 pairs walk into this hall convinced their trust in one another made them stronger. I have watched all of them break it, eventually, usually the moment survival demanded a choice between the other and themselves. Then you've been watching the wrong people, Izuku said. The voice was silent for a long moment. Then, without warning, the crimson columns of light surged upward, converging into a single blinding pillar directly between Izuku and Sukuna, forcing them apart despite his grip, despite every effort either of them made to hold on. Izuku felt herself thrown backward, skidding across polished black stone, and when she looked up, Sukuna was 100 meters away, on the opposite side of the hall, already rising into a fighting stance with a snarl twisting across his face. Let's test that claim, the voice said, and its form began to split, dividing, multiplying, 2 identical shapes peeling away from the original like cells dividing under microscope, one drifting toward Izuku, one toward Sukuna. 2 of you, 2 of me. Whichever of you survives their half of this hall first may come to the aid of the other, if there's anything left worth saving by then. Izuku's stomach dropped as the shape gliding toward her solidified, resolving into something with too many joints, and a face that flickered between blankness and something almost, horribly, like her own reflection. Across the hall, she heard Sukuna's voice rise in a short, sharp bark of laughter. Not fear, never fear, something closer to genuine delight at finally being given something worth fighting. Midoriya, he called out, and it was the first time he'd used her actual name instead of little hero or girl and something about that small shift landed harder than it should have. Don't die before I get there. I'd hate to lose this early. Same to you, she shot back, forcing steel into her voice as the shape before her raised a limb that ended not in a hand, but in something jagged and gleaming. Don't get comfortable thinking I need saving. The voice's copy lunged. Izuku moved to meet it, one for all roaring back to life through exhausted, battered limbs, and somewhere on the far side of the hall, she heard the unmistakable sound of Sukuna's cursed technique tearing the air apart, 4 arms and an ancient hunger unleashed all at once. 2 fights, 1 hall, and somewhere beneath the black stone floor, still screaming after 400 years, something that had already learned exactly how this story could end if they failed. Izuku didn't have time to think. The copy's jagged limb came down in a diagonal arc that would have split her collarbone if she hadn't thrown herself sideways, one for all screaming down her arm as she caught its momentum on a forearm block that sent shockwaves rattling through the polished floor. The impact numbed her hand to the elbow, but she'd learned something in the chamber upstairs, and she wasn't going to forget it now. Find the core. The copy didn't have a chest like the constructs had. It didn't seem to have a single point of light pulsing beneath flickering darkness at all, until she looked past the shape itself, past the jagged limbs and the almost face, and noticed the one part of it that never flickered. A small, steady point low in its center, unmoving while everything around it shifted and blurred. She feinted left, drew its next strike wide, and drove a 5% Delaware smash straight into that fixed point with everything her exhausted body had left. The copy shrieked, a sound like 100 voices layered on top of each other, tearing through the hall, and collapsed into the same hissing black dust as the constructs upstairs, gone in seconds. Across the hall, Sukuna wasn't faring worse. If anything, he looked like he was enjoying himself, 4 arms carving through his copy's defenses with a brutal, economical efficiency that spoke of centuries of practice, cursed energy crackling visibly around each strike. But Izuku caught something he might not have. The copy wasn't just fighting to win. It was stalling, buying time, its attacks growing looser, sloppier, as if it were waiting for something. "Sukuna," she shouted, already sprinting toward him across the black stone, ribs screaming in protest. "It's stalling." He didn't look at her, but something in his stance shifted, a fraction more cautious. "I noticed, little late too." The floor beneath him cracked open. It happened too fast for warning, the same crimson fissures from earlier splitting wide beneath his feet, and for one horrifying second Izuku watched Sukuna, the king of curses, the thing that had shrugged off invisible slashes and unmade constructs like they were nothing, go rigid as something reached up out of the dark and closed around his ankle. Not a hand, not quite. Something long and pale and covered in what looked, sickeningly, like scar tissue, wrapping tight enough to make even his enhanced frame flinch. "There it is," the voice's remaining copy said, somewhere behind Izuku, almost fond. "The one who screamed longest. It remembers strength when it feels it nearby. It wants company." Sukuna's face twisted, not fear, she realized, but fury, pure and absolute, the fury of something that had never once in its existence been caught. He drove a clawed hand down at the thing gripping his ankle, cursed energy flaring, and the pale limb split apart under the blow, but two more surged up to replace it, and Izuku understood, with a cold and sudden clarity, exactly what the voice had meant about something still screaming under the floor. It wasn't a threat, it was a trap, built from whatever had lost this exact fight 400 years ago, kept alive down there in agony, specifically to drag the next challenger down with it. She didn't think, she just ran. "Get off him," she hit the crack in the floor at a full sprint, driving one for all, no percentage held back now, 60, 70, whatever her battered body could still generate, straight down into the mass of pale limbs surrounding Sukuna's leg. The impact cratered the stone floor entirely, sent fragments of black rock spinning through the air, and the limbs shrieked, recoiling, releasing their grip just enough for Sukuna to tear free with a violence that took half of them with him. He staggered back, breathing hard for the first time since she'd met him, four eyes wide with something that looked almost like genuine shock. "You," he started. "Don't," Izuku cut in, gasping, barely upright, blood running fresh from a dozen reopened wounds. "Don't say I didn't need to, we're past that." Something in his expression cracked open, just slightly, just for a second, before the familiar sharp grin slid back into place, tired but real. "Yeah," he said, "we're past that." The remaining copy of the voice hovered at the edge of the crater, and for the first time since the hall had split them apart, its voice didn't sound patient anymore. It sounded, Izuku thought, almost unsettled. 400 years, it said. 400 years, and nothing has ever pulled someone back from that floor, not once. "Then you've been keeping bad company," Sukuna said, rolling his shoulder, forearms cracking back into a ready stance despite the blood soaking his leg. "Let's finish this before I start feeling sentimental. It's an unpleasant sensation, and I'd like it to stop." Izuku planted her feet beside him, one for all crackling faintly along both arms, more exhausted than she'd ever been in her life and somehow, impossibly, still standing. Together. Together, Sukuna confirmed, and there wasn't a trace of mockery in it this time. "Try to keep up, little hero." "You try to keep up," she shot back, and they moved as one. The voice's last copy didn't stand a chance against both of them at full, coordinated force. Sukuna, tearing through its defenses, with brutal, invisible slashes, while Izuku hunted for the fixed point at its center, finding it in seconds now that she knew exactly what to look for. Her final strike landed the same instant his did, and the copy didn't just collapse, it unraveled, darkness peeling away in long threads that dissolved into nothing, taking the crimson fissures in the floor and the screaming thing beneath it down with it. The throne room went silent. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then from somewhere far above, a voice drifted down, the keeper, unmistakable, though it sounded different now. Quieter, almost respectful. "Well, it said, that's not an outcome I expected." The black stone floor beneath them began to shift, reshaping itself into a staircase that spiraled not down, but up, toward a faint circle of ordinary daylight, visible impossibly far above daylight that had no business existing inside a castle without a sky. "Is that?" Izuku started. "An exit," Sukuna finished, and something in his voice was almost reluctant. "The keeper's letting us go. Apparently we passed whatever test that thing actually was." They climbed in silence for a long while, the staircase far shorter going up than it had been going down, as though the castle itself no longer wanted them there any longer than necessary. Near the top, where the daylight grew warm and real against Izuku's skin, for the first time in what felt like days, she finally spoke. "What happens now when we get out?" Sukuna was quiet for a moment, four eyes fixed on the light ahead. "I go back to being exactly what I was before you fell into my castle," he said, "and you go back to whatever world spat you out into mine. This doesn't change what I am, Midoriya. Don't mistake it for something it wasn't. I'm not, she said, but it happened anyway. That has to mean something. He glanced sideways at her, and for just a moment, something almost like warmth flickered behind the ancient cruelty in his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared, but real, undeniably real, while it lasted. Maybe, he admitted, don't get used to it. They stepped out into the light together, and the Infinity Castle closed silently behind them, keeping its secrets the way it always had, except for one. Somewhere in its endless, shifting halls, for one brief and impossible stretch of time, two monsters had chosen each other over the easy cruelty of walking alone. And that the castle would remember, long after both of them were gone. The end.